right. So for many people out there may have heard the interview of Katie Couric, where she was talking to people and giving and opining on a certain topic having to do with this article that I have for you today, which is going to bring up our discussion. This is from the World Net Daily, and the headline reads, and this isn't not a funny headline, this is actually pretty serious. Limbaugh says, Couric, AOC really do want to deprogram Trump supporters. And so the article goes on, it says, those calls by Katie Couric and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to deprogram and de-radicalize Trump supporters, don't take them lightly, warns talk radio host Rush Limbaugh, because they really mean it. And it goes on to say that Couric, the former NBC News anchor and Today host, said in an interview with Bill Maher that the question is, how are we going to really almost deprogram these people who have signed up for the cult of Trump? Ocasio-Cortez said last Friday at a virtual event that it's going to take a very long time to de-radicalize these people and a lot of effort. And a Democratic National Committee official, David Atkins, said on Twitter that deprogramming is needed for every one of more than 74 million people who voted for Trump on November 3rd. Limbaugh said that they are literally thinking of deprogramming conservatives. They don't call us conservatives. They call us Trump cultists, he said. Limbaugh posted comments from a number of network personalities. Allison Camerota spoke of the cult of Trump. Steve Hassan described Americans recruited by an authoritarian political cult. Mustafa Tamiz said a Trump cult that wants to believe whatever the dear leader says. Jeremy Bash said this was a long, deliberate effort by political leaders led by Donald Trump to brainwash to create a cult. Listen to those talking points. Limbaugh noted that until now, Americans had successfully handled the political divide for generations. There was a notion that we're Americans, that being American meant something. That's gone. Now, 35-40% of the country believes American is a dirty word, and that the American founding was illegitimate, that we are an illegitimate superpower because our founding was illegitimate and because our economic system, capitalism, is immoral and unjust, he said. So, I mean, folks, you don't have to look any further than Make America Great Again is controversial. Make America Great Again really ticks some people off. He said he sometimes, perhaps naively, has thought that every American loves his country. It's not true, he said. If any deprogramming is needed, he said, it should be for those who, through the American public education system, have been taught to hate this country. A start, he said, would have to take a stab at telling them why this country should be loved and adored and understood and built on its foundational premises. Couric, he said, wants conservatives deprogrammed because she doesn't want to have to deal with them. She believes they shouldn't have any access to constitutional rights because they are cultists. The radio star noted the left has redefined hate speech. So I'm going to leave it with that. There's more in that article. And I want to bring Mark and Daryl back in. And Sandy, if she can come back in. I want to talk about this whole element that this narrative is going out there and it's speaking against anybody who supported President Trump or has conservative values or has religious views or biblical views. Let me put it that way. People like us. People that believe in the Second Amendment, who believe in the First Amendment, who believe that we have a right to gather, who believe that we should be able to redress our grievances to the government. All of these things are being said that we are now the enemies of the state. They're calling us domestic enemies, and that we should be rounded up, re-educated, and as I think it was Larry Graswald who said, can't remember his last name. He infiltrated the Weather Underground and said their goal is to round up millions of Americans. And at this point in time in the 70s, it would have been 25 million Americans, send them to re-education camps in the Southwest, and if they would not be re-educated, they would exterminate them. And so these things that are out there. Several years ago, I think it was back in 2016, 2015, somewhere along there, that Hillary Clinton came out and said that they should have adult camps, fun camps for adults, where American citizens can be rounded up and sent to be re-educated. That's where some of this stuff first started coming out in the air. Now that President Trump is out of office, now they're saying literally a coup d'etat is actually taking place. This was a coup before the American people, but we're facing this this situation has become mainstream. It's mainstream media is now promoting the fact that we should not have a voice, and that our thinking is all messed up and it's wrong. So, Daryl, from the perspective of the Canadians, from your perspective, as you see these things happening here, you guys are like several years ahead of us. What you're seeing in Canada, America is quickly trying to accelerate to catch up with. What are your thoughts about this type of thinking that's out there and it's being propagated?
Well, as a believer, you're watching. There was a conversation we had, my wife had with one of the guys who was in our fellowship. And his attitude is, well, you can't get in the way of the book of Revelation unfolding. And so he takes a very passive approach to the gospel, and something that we're obviously going to be working on him with. But the one question the one thing I said to my wife is, well, yes, the book of Revelation is inevitable. What's not inevitable is when it happens. And so if there was an article I sent out to everybody, I know both of you got it the other day, from Coach Dave, who's been pretty active online for quite a while now.
Yes.
And he was the guy who was suing the NFL for the pornographic Super Bowl halftime show from, last year, 2 years ago or something like that. I can't remember which one it was. Last year, I think it was, actually. And, you can look at this from, we can either sit back and we can watch tyranny completely overtake us, because we know where this is going. And so Canada has been way ahead of the game for a long time. But what, now that the New World Order is doing is they're trying to get everybody else caught up to the same place. And so you look at what happened with the US election, and they wanted everybody to know what they were doing. It wasn't hidden. And they wanted everybody to know that you can't do a damn thing about it, is really what they're saying. Like, go ahead. And it's very typical of the enemy to think that God's just going to sit back and he's not going to act. The angels came down in Genesis 6:4, and they started their campaign of corrupting the human race so that there would be nothing left in the image of God, and God sent the flood. Nimrod, not too far removed from this whole event, decides that he's going to build a tower high enough where God can't, drown people out again if he is going to punish everybody. And God comes down and confuses everybody's language so they can't talk. So the enemy always thinks he's got God figured out. And so what you're seeing in the United States right now is this frantic. I mean, it is frantic what's going on. Everybody losing their minds, trying to impeach Donald Trump a second time. How come? He's out. But they know that there are things still in play that he can do that are going to thwart them. So we've taken a much more passive approach, Canadians usually do. And it's frightening to see the speed at which they're trying to bring the United States under 1930s Germany conditions. And the one thing that we still have to cling on to is that God is still in charge, and too many people have said that God's not turning this nation over yet. But there is going to be a lot of difficulty. There is going to be a lot of persecution about wanting to re-educate us. I mean, isn't that what the concentration camps were? That we need to re-educate people. And then they decided, well, we're not going to just re-educate them. We're just going to eliminate them. So it's quite fascinating. And if we don't believe that God's going to intervene, this is truly frightening, because we are going to end up in the liquidation camps, which is really what they're talking about. They say, well, we're going to come in and re-educate you. But what they're really saying is that we're just going to harvest your organs and we're going to kill you.
Yeah, interesting. You brought up something, and I want to ask you this question from your perspective, Daryl. Do you think that there was a psychological operation going on because of the brazen, in-your-face election fraud, and on one side saying, don't believe your lying eyes, and then, but also to bring out and expose Trump supporters, conservatives, people that stand on the Constitution, because we're all considered to be enemies of the state. I mean, there's 72 listed enemies of the state, of which all of those are listed. Do you think it was to bring them out so they can become vocal, to be identified? What do you think? Well, I mean, there's so many parallels going on with Nazi Germany.
Well, what does Ecclesiastes say? There's nothing new under the sun. And the reason is because the techniques work every time. The devil doesn't have to create anything new. He may have to dress it up differently. He may need a different label, different ribbon on it, or something like that. But the MO is always still the same. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to, from a psychological perspective, they're trying to enforce learned helplessness. That there really is nothing that we can do. I mean, Trump, he barnstormed the entire country and won the election. There are some who are estimating he got over 80 million votes. That I've even heard suggestions he may have even gotten 100 million.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, you can't even begin to get your head around that kind of vote totals. Mm-hmm. And yet they walked right out and they said, we don't really care. We're going to steal this from you. Bottom line, nothing you can do about it. Mm-hmm. And so when you're in a situation like that, and I've actually been in situations like that, where I remember when I was living in Mexico over 20 years ago, and my partner, who was quite a bit older than me, and he was the majority partner and everything else. And the man was a sociopath, truly. And his objective was to completely destroy me. And so I ended up in a situation right before I left, and it was right after I came home that I got saved, that he was going to have total control over me. So on a personal level, I understand what's going on a national level right now. And that conservatives are trying, they're trying to cow us into just rolling over and playing dead. And well, you may think that your guns are going to protect you, which they will. But I mean, if they can also, if the military has got way bigger guns and way more guns, and if they're coming at us with armor piercing bullets and stuff like that, it's going to be a bloodbath. And really, to be honest with you, I think God is the only answer to the United States not falling into a tyrannical regime, which would even be worse, if you can believe it or not, than what Nazi Germany is, or was rather. Mm-hmm. Because the ideology that they're trying to impose is so much worse than even what went on 75 years ago. It's madness.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, it is. And the parallels also go with Stalinist Soviet Union. Mark, what are your thoughts?
Well, I also agree. I think we all have to agree that God is the only answer and what God has planned. And it's amazing. It's funny because just Saturday night, we had Tova. Everybody knows Tova, Bonnie Dewberry, and she was over at the house, and we were talking about these specific things. And it was funny that I mentioned what the rabbi said during his Torah portion teaching last Sabbath is that it's all we don't have anything else but God, because he is the one that sets things forth. Without God, there is nothing else. There's, I'm trying to think of word for word what you said and how we were saying, but I can't. All of a sudden, the thoughts are gone. But I agree. Of course, I hope that it is God's plan that we have a convention of states. We talked about that last week on the show. I believe that is a number one way of getting our country back in line. And that is an organized way of doing this. Quite honestly, we talk about a civil war, we talk about the Democrats and the Republicans and all the different things that are rising up. The people are on two different sides. But if we're going to get this country back into anything where it's supposed to be, it has to be organized. Somebody has to organize something and put it together and figure it out and rationally put everything in order. We can talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. And that's the way it always ends up. Is you have all the talk shows and all the different people that come up with 1,000 different ideas of what we need to do, and say, yeah, we need to rise up against them. We need to do this and do this, but nobody's organizing anything. Nobody is coming together and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. No, that's not true. There is one organization, and that's the Constitution of States. There's over 3 million United States members of this organization, and they are organizing. They are organizing based on our Constitution to put together something that will bring everything back in order and hold the legislative and executive powers of the United States. They can hold them accountable for what they're doing and what they have done. But once again, it's something that has to be organized. And I get really tired of everybody saying, okay, well, yeah, this is happening and this is happening and this is happening. And yet, what are you going to do? And I think this is the one thing. And I pray, ever since I found out about the Convention of States, I pray the Lord is behind this, and this is what he's trying to pull together. Because I agree with Daryl. Without the Lord's initiative, without the Lord getting us together to do it, it's not going to happen. You mentioned the Klingons. Yeah, sure. Maybe we should bring the Klingons into this, Daryl. By the way, you said one of the last things you said in your report had to do with somebody said that the cultists have no rights according to the Constitution or something like that. I jotted this down. I don't know exactly what it was you said, but that's a misstatement and a half, just because your cultist doesn't have anything to do with your rights.
Katie Couric says she believes they shouldn't have any access to constitutional rights because they are cultists.
See, that's just wrong.
I think before we go on, because it's time to go to the next segment, but we've got to remember that they've already started the cycle. They say it enough and enough and enough, and the stupid of America and the United States and the world will believe it. that there, as John said, as you guys have said, there was only one radicalized side that we've seen over the last 4 years, and it was not the majority of the American people are pro-Trump. And I'm not talking the elite and those they start, but the majority, just as Daryl pointed out, 80 to 100 million votes, just votes, and there's some that didn't vote. That's the majority of the American people were pro-Trump, but so within that, many hold that vestige of God or Jesus or Yeshua and are led that way. And that's why it's that same sort of evil mentality that has lashed out over God's people throughout time. And not only here, but in Canada and the rest of the world, let's get rid of those that wear the name of Yahweh
So here's, I'm just going to wrap this up, and then we're going to move to the Torah portion. And in this article, it says, Rush Limbaugh is saying how they redefined hate speech. So how do you define a hate? Well, they're already off and running on that. If you're conservative and don't like Biden, you're hateful, he said. If you say the wrong thing about the presidential election of 2020, you could be categorized as a domestic terrorist. And if it becomes necessary to eliminate certain people from participating because they engage in hate speech, all you have to do is define hate speech as something that opposes the government, for example. That's how most totalitarian regimes do it. If you oppose the government, wow, you're dangerously close to trafficking in hate.
But what are the leaders of those regimes called?
Dictators. Tyrants.
Despots. And that's what we have now in the United States, that's sitting in the United States.
Well, the States.
Yeah.
We need a convention of states. We need somebody to rise up and organize. We do.
But I think it's going to have to be underground, Mark. It can't be out in the open, because the very voice that brings out is going to want to destroy it and never let it happen.
Yeah, cancel culture has taken, President Trump off all social media. It's removing his bank accounts, and it's doing that to
we need to pray for
other big voices like Laura Loomer was what had that happen to him. There was another, Joe Biggs just was canceled. Cancel culture got him, closed his bank accounts recently, and that was just like over just this last week. And so those are the big voices, and they are going after others that are out there. And so, yeah, we got to organize this thing. We got to work fast. We have to work very quickly. And while we still have those rights.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.